Can we make this quick? I have a Zoom call in 30 minutes, Vanessa muttered, adjusting her designer sunglasses, though they were inside. Ethan didn't even glance back at Margaret. He kept his eyes forward, hands tight on the steering wheel. Margaret sat silently in the back seat of her own car. The silence was louder than the turn signal. She held a plastic bag on her lap, filled with her medications, a small notebook, and the floral scarf David had bought her the year before he died. She clutched it now, as if it still held his warmth. The building loomed ahead. Not a retirement villa, not a cozy place with afternoon bingo and daffodils. It looked more like a place people didn't leave. Concrete, grey, soulless. Margaret blinked slowly, trying to stop the sting in her eyes. She wouldn't cry. Not in front of them. "This is the place," Ethan said. Flat. Final. The car stopped. No one moved. Margaret opened her own door. Her knees cracked as she stepped out. Her hands shook as she reached for her cane. Ethan finally got out to open the trunk. One small suitcase. That was all they let her bring. "Here," he said, setting it on the pavement. Margaret looked up at him. Her son. Her baby. The boy she raised through 2 jobs and endless scraped knees. He couldn't meet her eyes. Vanessa checked her phone. Margaret cleared her throat. Will you come visit?" Vanessa answered before Ethan could. "We'll see. Depends how things go." Margaret nodded. Once. Then walked inside. She didn't look back. If she had, she might have seen Ethan exhale, or Vanessa rolling her eyes. But she didn't. She walked through the automatic doors into a world that smelled of bleach and loss. A nurse at the desk looked up, young, too cheerful. "Name?" "Margaret Doyle." "Oh, room 209, right this way." She followed the nurse down a hallway, lit by tired fluorescent lights. The walls were beige, the silence louder than any hospital. They passed one door that was slightly open. Inside, someone was crying. The kind of cry that wasn't new. It sounded like it had lived there for years. Room 209. Small. Cold. A twin bed with stiff sheets. A nightstand. A single plastic chair. No curtains. No pictures. Not yet. "Settle in, hun. Dinner's at 5. The nurse left. Margaret sat. Her bones ached. Her heart, too. She stared at the wall. This was not her home. This was not her life. But as the nurse's footsteps faded and the building swallowed the sound, Margaret's mind slowly began to replay the last 3 months. The missed calls, the sudden shift in Ethan's tone, the private conversations with Vanessa behind closed doors, the accidental cancellation of her doctor's appointments, and finally, the suggestion that she was struggling. "Just for a few weeks," Ethan had said. "Until you're stronger," Vanessa had added with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. But Margaret wasn't weak. She was grieving, tired, slower, yes, but not broken. And now, alone in this lifeless room, she finally understood. They hadn't done this for her. They did it for something else. Something much colder. Something that lived at the end of a deed. And they had no idea what she still remembered. What she still owned. What she was capable of. She smiled faintly. It wasn't over. Not even close. The first night was the hardest. Margaret lay on the stiff twin mattress, her coat still on. She hadn't unpacked. There was nothing worth unpacking. The room was cold, though the radiator hissed in protest. She could hear a television through the wall playing some game show rerun on loop. Laughter, applause, none of it hers. She stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks. They looked like veins, like the ones on her hands. Time passed strangely here. The clock above the door ticked, slow and cruel. Every hour felt like two. No windows in this part of the hallway, no sense of morning or night, just the rhythm of pain meds and lukewarm meals on plastic trays. She heard shuffling outside her room, a walker, dragging, a cough, the beeping of machines. No knock, no visit, no Ethan. She didn't expect Vanessa. That woman had never once visited her on her own. But Ethan, he'd promised. "I'll come back tomorrow, Mum. We'll talk more then." Tomorrow had come and gone. By the third day, Margaret realized no one would be back. She moved slower now. Her hips ached from the bed, her ankles swollen. They brought her oatmeal in the morning. She stirred it until it turned cold, then flushed it when the nurse turned her back. Everyone was nice, kind voices, soft steps. But kindness wasn't family. She heard stories in the cafeteria, other residents talking. "I thought my daughter would call. It's been 5 months. They sold my car while I was in surgery. I signed the paper. Didn't know what it was. Now my name's off the will." Margaret said nothing, but she listened, and each story stitched itself to hers. On the fourth night, she shuffled to the common room. There was a bookshelf, dusty, unread. She pulled out a leather-bound ledger and opened it to the middle. The page was blank. She stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, she wrote one line. "They moved me here, but they forgot what I still own." She closed the book and smiled. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting, just like her. The next morning, Margaret woke to the sound of trays being wheeled down the hall. Her joints ached, her mouth dry. A nurse she hadn't met yet entered without knocking. "Morning, Miss Doyle. I'm Lila. Breakfast." The tray landed on the bedside table with a soft clink. Oatmeal again, a slice of toast, the same pale tea. Margaret offered a tight nod. Lila didn't smile like the others, but she didn't fake it either. There was something about her. Calm, steady, like she didn't pity Margaret, just saw her. "I'll be back for the tray in 20 minutes, Lila said, then paused. "Unless you want company." Margaret blinked. That was the first time anyone had offered that. She gestured to the chair. Lila sat, pulling a pen from her pocket and a notepad from the tray. "Vitals are fine. No complaints from the night staff. But I'd like to hear it from you." Margaret hesitated, then cleared her throat. "They brought me here without warning." Lila didn't write that down. "They said it was temporary, but I can see now, I don't think they plan to come back." Lila nodded slowly. "People think older women are invisible," Margaret whispered. "But I see everything. I saw the way my daughter-in-law packed my suitcase, like she couldn't wait." "What about your son?" Margaret's lips tightened. He was quiet, like a child hiding behind someone else's decision. Lila didn't ask more. She just sat there. And for the first time in days, Margaret felt a flicker of something strange. Relief. Over the next week, Lila became a quiet presence in Margaret's mornings. Not always talkative, never intrusive, but she brought extra sugar for the tea. She sat for a few minutes longer each day. One afternoon, Margaret asked, "You have family?" "Brother?" Lila said. "You?" "Had a husband. David. He passed 3 years ago. Son, Ethan. He used to call every week." "Used to?" Margaret nodded. "Until he met her." The words hung in the air. Lila didn't press, but her eyes stayed soft. It was on a rainy Wednesday that Lila noticed a photograph sticking out from Margaret's notebook. A modest house, brick, green shutters, a swing in the front yard. Lila pointed. "Your home?" Margaret's fingers closed around it protectively. Then, after a pause, she handed it to her. That's mine. Bought it with David in 78. Paid off by 94. It's in my name. You mean, still? Margaret nodded. Ethan moved in with his wife 2 years ago. Said he'd take care of it. I never transferred the deed. Lila blinked. So, it's legally yours? Every tile, every brick, every rosebush in the garden. There was a long silence. Then Lila smiled, not out of amusement, out of recognition. I know someone, an elder rights attorney, quiet, sharp. Would you like me to make a call? Margaret's hands shook slightly as she reached for her cup. She took a breath. Yes. That night, she slept better than she had in weeks. The next day, Lila brought her tea and an address. Her name's Gina. She does house calls for cases like this. I told her about you. Margaret folded the slip of paper like it was gold. She would write a letter. She would tell the truth. Not the version Ethan and Vanessa had painted, where she was a burden, a confused, aging woman. Number, she still had her mind, and she had her house. Now she had a witness, a nurse who listened. And soon, she would have her voice back. The envelope sat untouched on Margaret's bedside table for a full day, cream-coloured, heavy, the kind of paper that meant business. It stared at her while she sipped her tea, while she looked out the window, while the hallway noises buzzed in and out of her day. Lila had placed it there gently, saying only, "She's waiting for your call." But Margaret didn't open it right away. She was waiting, not for courage. That had been building in her bones like a storm. She was waiting for silence, real silence. Not the institutional hush of the care home, but the quiet that settles in your chest when you know what must come next. On the third morning, before breakfast trays arrived, she opened the envelope. Inside were 2 crisp sheets, Gina's business card, a typed letter introducing herself, and a handwritten note in fine cursive. I don't need you to prove anything. I just need the truth. Let's talk. Margaret's lips curled. Truth. She still had plenty of that. She pulled out her notebook, the one Vanessa hadn't thought to throw away. She turned to the back and started a list. Timeline: David passes away. September 2019. Ethan and Vanessa move in. January 2021. Margaret falls. August 2022. Vanessa calls it the first sign. Doctor's appointments cancelled. October 2022. Ethan suggests part-time care. November 2022. Moved to care home. January 3rd, 2023. She tapped the pen, then wrote another heading. Things I still own. The house. Fully paid. In my name only. The bank account David left. My story. By mid-afternoon, Lila entered the room quietly. She paused when she saw the notebook, the open letter, the pen still in Margaret's hand. You ready? Margaret nodded. Lila pulled out her phone and dialed. Gina? Yes, it's Lila. She's ready. Margaret took the phone and raised it slowly to her ear. The woman's voice on the other end was calm, clear, firm. I've read your file, Mrs. Doyle. I've reviewed the deed. And if what you're telling me is true, you have every right to take legal action? Margaret's voice didn't tremble. I want to start. The next days moved fast. Lila helped scan documents. Margaret dug through old folders, bank statements, utility bills, the original deed tucked in a Christmas card from 1994. Everything had her name. Not Ethan's. Not Vanessa's. Gina came on a Thursday afternoon. A small woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a leather briefcase. She listened more than she spoke. You've been written off, she said, but not legally. That's all that matters. Margaret signed the papers. Gina left with copies and a promise. They'll get the letter within the week. Margaret sat in her chair that night and watched the wind move the trees outside. For the first time in months, she felt weightless. She imagined Vanessa walking into the kitchen with a glass of wine, bragging about the renovations. She imagined Ethan scrolling through his emails, casually clicking open a subject line that read, "Notice of repossession. Property at 228 Briarwood Lane." She closed her eyes and let the thought play out. Let them be surprised. Let them feel powerless for once. Because this wasn't just about a house. This was about dignity, about being seen, about making sure no one ever wrote her off again. Vanessa lit a scented candle in the hallway and stepped back with a satisfied smile. Lavender and eucalyptus? Finally, something that doesn't smell like old lady and mothballs, she said. Ethan glanced up from his laptop, legs stretched on the couch. Isn't that her favorite scent? Vanessa rolled her eyes. Exactly. Her old favorite. The house had changed fast. Margaret's floral wallpaper, gone, replaced with sleek greys and soft whites. The doilies, the vintage china, the family portraits, packed into boxes and stored in the garage. Or, more honestly, tossed. Vanessa had turned the dining room into her home office. A ring light glowed near her laptop. She now filmed skincare tutorials from the table where Margaret used to serve Sunday roast. Ethan didn't say much about the transformation. He liked the quiet, liked the space, and maybe, just maybe, liked the freedom. She seems okay? He asked one night, scrolling through his unread text messages, none of which were from his mother. Vanessa shrugged. The staff says she eats. That's something. They had no idea what Margaret was really doing. Ethan's guilt came in flashes, an empty coffee mug she used to sip from, the garden tools still hanging in the shed. But then Vanessa would appear with her perfect hair and endless reassurances. She's old, Ethan. She needed care. You're not a bad son. You're practical. And that was what he needed to hear. 3 weeks in, Vanessa began talking about renovations. The upstairs bathroom is basically medieval. I want a walk-in shower, brass fixtures, maybe subway tile. Ethan flinched. That'll cost a lot. She smiled. So does assisted living. But at least this increases the resale value. That word. Resale. Margaret's voice echoed faintly in Ethan's head. Don't you dare treat this house like a transaction. He pushed the memory away. One Friday night, friends came over. Wine flowed. Laughter echoed. This place looks amazing, V, someone said, swirling a Cabernet. Hard to believe it used to be your mother-in-law's. Vanessa tilted her head. Used to be, she repeated, amused. The next morning, Ethan sat on the porch, coffee in hand, and tried to shake the unease building in his gut. He opened his inbox, clicked on an unfamiliar sender. The subject line hit like a punch. Notice of legal action. Property at 228 Briarwood Lane. His coffee slipped from his hand. Vanessa came running. What happened? Ethan didn't speak, just handed her the screen. She read it once, then again. Her face drained of colour. She never transferred the deed, Ethan whispered. Vanessa's hands trembled. What do you mean? I mean, we don't own this house. And that was the moment it all began to crumble. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. It came in a thick envelope with the kind of weight that made Ethan's stomach twist before he even opened it. Certified mail. Signed and stamped. Vanessa picked it up from the front step. She held it like it might explode. What is this? She asked. Ethan had a bad feeling. He sat down on the couch and tore it open. Vanessa watched his face as he read. His eyes scanned the first line, then the second. By the fourth, his hands were shaking. He dropped the letter onto the coffee table, staring down at it like it had burned him. Vanessa snatched it up. She read it twice. Then her mouth fell open. "Notice of legal action?" she hissed. Ethan didn't answer. "She's taking the house back? She's suing us?" Still nothing. "Say something," Vanessa snapped. "She never signed it over," Ethan whispered. "What?" "She never transferred the deed. We never legally owned this place. But all the renovations, the money, she still owns it." Vanessa's knees gave out beneath her, and she sat hard on the arm of the couch, her jaw clenched, eyes wild. "You said she agreed to it. You said it was handled." "I thought it was. We talked about it. But she never filed it." The living room was silent. Then Vanessa stood. "Number, no way. You fix this. Now call her." Miles away, Margaret was sitting at her small writing desk by the window, sipping chamomile tea and watching the snow fall. Lila stepped in, holding her tablet. "They received it." Margaret didn't look up. "And?" She screamed. He looked like he saw a ghost. Margaret chuckled softly. "He did. The ghost of responsibility." She set her tea down and picked up her pen. "They thought I would sit here and rot, that I wouldn't fight back. You just sent them a wrecking ball." Margaret smiled. That was just the first knock. Vanessa called 3 times that night. Margaret didn't answer. On the 4th call, she picked up. "Margaret," Vanessa began, too sweet, too fast. "I just want to understand." "You understand perfectly," Vanessa stammered. "This isn't fair. You know we've put work into that house. We've made it a home." "Whose home?" Margaret asked. "I lived there 40 years. You threw away my teacups and turned my dining room into a film set." Vanessa's voice sharpened. "We thought we were helping you." "No," Margaret said. "You were helping yourselves. You'd rather see your own son homeless." "I'd rather see him humbled." Vanessa hissed through her teeth. "You're bitter." "I'm awake." And she hung up. Later that evening, Margaret folded the second letter. This one wasn't for Ethan. It was for her lawyer. It was a request for accelerated repossession, because Margaret had a plan. They took her freedom. They forgot one thing. She still had her name on the deed. And now, she was reclaiming every inch of it. 3 days, 3 long days. That's how long it took Ethan to show his face after the letter. He didn't call. He didn't text. He just appeared. It was early, cold. The kind of morning where your breath fogs the glass before the sun even finds the window. Margaret was in the library. Same chair, same soft shawl over her shoulders. A book she wasn't really reading resting on her lap. Lila saw him first. He walked in like he had a right to be there. Lila straightened. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Margaret Doyle." "She doesn't take visitors without notice." "I'm her son." Lila tilted her head. "That doesn't carry as much weight as it used to." Still, she pointed him toward the library. He walked slowly, like the floor might collapse. Margaret didn't look up as he entered. He stood there, hesitating, watching her, 100 memories pressing against his chest. "Mum?" She turned a page. "Margaret." He tried again, quieter. Her eyes flicked up. "I see the letter got your attention." "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Why now?" She closed the book, placed it gently on the table. "I spent months in this place," she said. "Alone, forgotten, like a coat you hang up and never wear again." Ethan shifted. "It wasn't like that." No? Then tell me what it was like. He opened his mouth, closed it. I was trying to help. No, you were trying to simplify your life. He flinched. She stood. I fed you from my own plate, carried you when you couldn't walk, fought for you when the world was cruel. Her voice didn't rise, but it cut. And when I needed a fraction of that care, you dropped me here like luggage you no longer needed. Ethan looked down. I was scared, he said. You were getting older, and we didn't know what to do. You do what families do, she said. You stay. You try. You don't abandon. Silence. I didn't want this to get legal, he muttered. She smiled. Then you shouldn't have taken what wasn't yours. I didn't know. You didn't ask. He stepped forward. Can't we talk about this? Work something out? You had months to talk. You chose silence. She turned toward the window. You have until the end of the month. That's more than you gave me. He didn't move. You should go now, Ethan. Please. Margaret didn't answer. She sat back down, opened her book, turned a page. And just like that, he was no longer her son, just another man who underestimated the strength of a quiet woman. Vanessa slammed the drawer shut. The sound echoed. Another spoon, another piece of silverware into the box. She didn't wrap them, didn't care if they scratched. Ethan stood in the doorway, arms crossed, motionless. You could help, she said, without looking at him. He didn't answer. She turned. Are you just going to stand there? He blinked. She meant it. No, really. Vanessa's voice was a slap. I didn't think she'd actually... She did. Vanessa ripped a photo off the wall. It was their wedding portrait. Margaret had paid for the whole ceremony. Now the frame cracked in her hands. She's old. This place should be ours by now. Ethan didn't respond. She doesn't even need it. What's she going to do in a 2-story house? Still nothing. Vanessa's anger turned. Why didn't you tell me it was still in her name? Ethan finally moved, sat on the edge of the couch, rubbed his face like he could wipe the guilt off. She never said. It just felt assumed. She outplayed you, Vanessa snapped. She sat quiet and let us dig our own grave. Boxes stacked by the door, labeled in her sharp handwriting. Kitchen. Office? Vanessa's studio. She looked around, the home she had decorated, painted, redesigned, gone, being packed into cardboard and tape. She's not keeping it, Vanessa whispered. Ethan looked up. I'll fight it, she said. You have rights. No, I don't. You're her son. Exactly. I was her son. Now I'm a squatter. The words stung them both. Vanessa grabbed her planner, flipped pages. We'll get an appointment. A lawyer, a judge, something. Ethan shook his head. She's not bluffing. Outside, the wind knocked against the shutters. Inside, it was dead quiet. Vanessa looked at the dining table. Their first Thanksgiving? Gone. The little mark in the floor from when she dropped a candle. Gone. Everything they thought was secure was now just memory. A loud memory. The front door opened. Both of them jumped. It was the mailman. He handed Vanessa a thick envelope. No return address. She tore it open. Read. Ethan watched her face drain. What is it? She's reclaiming the utilities, Vanessa whispered. All of it. Water, power, internet. Can she do that already? She already did. Ethan stood. We have to go. Vanessa was frozen. No, she said. We fight. You can't fight someone who already won. They looked around. The lights flickered. And for the first time, the house didn't feel like theirs. It felt borrowed. It felt temporary. It felt like the past was coming back. And it wasn't going to ask nicely. The van pulled up at exactly 9:17 a.m. It was old, rust-colored, the kind you rent for cheap on weekdays. But it didn't matter what it looked like. What mattered was who stepped out of it. Margaret's foot touched the pavement first. One steady step, then the other. No cane, no hesitation. Lila followed, clipboard in hand, a small bag over her shoulder. Margaret stood in front of the house. Her house. It looked the same. And yet everything had changed. The rose bushes were dying, overwatered or ignored. The shutters had a film of dust. The front steps, still cracked at the edge, hadn't been swept in months. It felt unfamiliar. She walked slowly toward the door. Every step was measured. Not because she was old, because she was reclaiming something. Lila unlocked the door. Margaret stepped inside. The air was different. Stale. Perfumed. Like someone tried to cover the scent of selfishness with scented candles. The walls had new paint, a colder grey. The couch was different. Velvet, not her old cotton blend. And the family photos. Gone. Margaret walked to the kitchen, opened a drawer. Empty. Not even a spoon. Lila stepped in behind her. They took everything they thought mattered, she said. But they left the house. Margaret nodded. She ran her fingers across the counter. The stone was smooth, cold. She turned to the hallway, took each step slowly. Not from pain, from memory. Each door she passed whispered something. Here's where you made lunches. Here's where he had chicken pox. Here's where you stood crying when he didn't come home that night. The house remembered. Even if they didn't. Margaret opened the bedroom door. It was empty. No sheets, no pillows. Just walls and air and the faint outline where her dresser used to be. Lila touched her shoulder. You okay? Margaret smiled. I'm perfect. They walked through the house for nearly an hour. Every drawer checked, every window tested, every room claimed again. When she reached the living room, she sat down. Same spot where Ethan used to fall asleep during storms. Same spot where she nursed him with fevers. Same spot where she waited, night after night, for him to come back as a grown man. Now it was hers again, completely, utterly, unapologetically. She turned to Lila. Let's get started. What first? Photos. Lila pulled out the prints, old ones, young Ethan, her husband before he passed. Christmas, birthdays. Margaret with flour on her face in the kitchen. They began putting them back up, one by one. The wall came alive again, with truth, with memory, with everything that mattered. Margaret lit a candle. Vanilla, software familiar, not to mask anything, to remind the house what home really smelled like. She sat down again, looked around, and breathed. Not because she had to, but because she finally could. The envelope was cream-coloured, thick, heavy, no return address. Just a name handwritten on the front. Ethan Doyle. It arrived a week after Margaret moved back in. She didn't send it immediately. She waited, let time settle like dust on the silence between them. When Ethan opened it, he was sitting in a small apartment above a laundromat. It smelled like detergent and regret. The letter read, Ethan, you once asked me why I did this, why I came back, why I didn't forgive. You said I was being cruel, but cruelty is putting your mother in a nursing home without looking her in the eye. Cruelty is silence. Cruelty is convenience dressed up as care. I didn't take revenge. I took back my dignity. The house was mine before you were born. I bought it with your father, paid every inch of that mortgage, built every memory. You thought aging made me weak. You were wrong. I'm stronger now than I've ever been. I've left nothing to chance. My will is filed. My accounts are sealed. And when the time comes, and it will, This house will become a safe haven for women who've been left behind like I was. You won't inherit my silence, or my sorrow, or my savings. You'll inherit a lesson. That love, real love, isn't something you toss aside when it no longer fits your schedule. You don't need to write back. I've said everything I needed to. Margaret. He read it 3 times. Each word was a stone on his chest. Vanessa never asked what was inside. She had stopped asking questions weeks ago. The apartment was cold. He folded the letter, sat quietly, and finally cried. Back at the house, Margaret stood by the window. The light poured across her face. Outside, children laughed down the street. Inside, a kettle boiled softly. Lila stepped in. You sure about the foundation? Yes, Margaret said. Let this house be more than walls. Let it be hope. She placed the deed into a folder, stamped it. Final. She didn't need applause. She didn't need recognition. All she needed was what she had reclaimed: her name, her home, and her peace. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about something stronger: redemption, dignity, and the power of being underestimated. The end.